With the deal at Maryland, I know you came in under kind of an interesting set of circumstances with the previous coach leaving, and I was just going over all that information. Is that something you want to dive into a little bit about how you've kind of gone into kind of, I don't know, not only rehab the image, but kind of having to kind of deal on the tail end of that?
Sure, man. I mean, we're an open book for coaches, so we tell them all the time if we have an open door policy. So there's nothing there that I'm afraid to address. So we can talk about whatever you want when it comes to
Okay.
that.
Yeah, no, I'm really pretty fascinated. I mean, just my history, man. I played in the NFL for 10 years, and I played at Berkeley, and the amount of strength coaches that I've been involved with, and so it's interesting whenever I read these. This is happening in college football, and I always, unfortunately, have my tinted lens of having gone through some really awful stuff. The way, and as you know, I mean, how old are you?
35.
Okay, yeah, I'm 44, so I'm a little bit older. But it's interesting how things used to be compared to how they are today. And I wonder if that has to do with not only social media, are people more involved? There's more spotlight. I mean, I've seen coaches get fired for things that like I didn't even at the time think was even a big deal that somebody said, and it's just kind of a different lens. But yeah, I was just kind of reading some of the reports and what happened with the previous staff. Uh, I mean, is the culture changed? Are the kids different? I mean, what's really like? What have you done to really go in and rehab this?
Well, as I tell people, it's really hard for me to comment on something when I wasn't here, but I can tell you where the culture was when I got here versus where it is today is I think it's night and day. Um, these players is first of all, let me say this: it's been a privilege to serve these guys and to be able to help them kind of get over the hump and climb that mountain to, you use the term rehab, but I'll say to get the program where they want it to be and where they deserve it to be. I think from their perspective with us, some things that I know that have been really good. Consistency for them has been really good. I've learned more about vulnerability and transparency since I've been here than any other point in my career. So I think that's been a huge part in the relationship building with the athletes here in the program because, for me, transparency and vulnerability is not just being honest with players. It's really putting players in a position to show them a side of you that most people don't get the opportunity to see. So, as you guys know, my wife Marissa, she comes in all the time here. She trains all the time here. The other wives come through. Mason's got 4 kids. We usually have time. This is before COVID, but we would have time throughout the week where we may have a day or two where it's family time and all the kids come in and they run around for an hour, but that doesn't exclude players, right? It's important that they get to see Coach Baggett as a father. So, like, how does he treat his son? How does he work with his son? We've done things. We have players over at the house all the time. I wish I had gotten footage of this. One of the things we did last year, the players wanted to have a fight night. And so for one of the fights that there was, we rented it on pay-per-view and we had the guys show up to the house. And, Riss told me, she says, well, how many of them you think are coming? And I said, well, I don't know. I said, I think 20 of them. Yeah, yeah. Well, I said, I think 20 of them signed up on the board to come. And we ended up having like 35 come by the house. And they stayed at the house till 3 a.m. But one of the best things that we got to see, we created an environment for them where they could be them. So they had shoes off. They're ragging on each other. They're joking with each other. It was so awesome to be able to see. And those are the things that give new meaning to vulnerability and transparency. So I think this team has grown incredibly close. And I think when you learn all the aspects of what it means to be vulnerable and what it means to be transparent, the thing that goes up on the other end is the trust factor. And that's what we've worked. We've been very intentional about how we're going to build that. So the trust is at a place right now where with my players, I mean, we talk to our players about everything. If Marissa and I are having issues, I'll talk to players about it because if I don't ever give them the opportunity to learn what I'm going through, then how am I ever going to help them with what they're going to go through? You know, there are times where when Coach Baggett is learning things about being a father, you know, with his kids, you'll go out and see him with a group and he'll be sharing those things because we have some players that have kids and they need to know how to get through these things. But if you're never honest with them and you're never sharing that part of your life with them, that's the ugly part, right? That's the part that people don't want to put on social media. Social media is like a highlight reel, but it doesn't show the real issues that you got to go through in your life. Those are the things that we try to share with these guys because that's how they grow. And I think because we have the trust with them and that vulnerability and transparency, we've been able to do that, and we've created a culture where the sense of having each other's back. So like we say, if something happens to me, because they really know who I am, they don't get permission to just walk by and look. And it's the same thing with me. If something happens to them, I no longer can I got to get involved because I know I'm on that level now. So that's been really, really good with our players here. It's been really good with our program, and it's been a learning experience. There's a lot of this that, you know, from a player aspect, from a coach aspect, we've been learning on the fly, so to speak, with some of this stuff because there's no book, there's no manual written on how to do this or how to take over a program that's been through some of the things these guys have been through.
Did how many guys or did you guys lose a lot in terms of transfers? Or, you know, I mean, I know that, like, you know, the transfer portal and kids can kind of bounce around. I just didn't know if there was an exodus out of the school.
Yeah, we didn't have a mass exodus. I mean, sure, we had some attrition. But one of the things that Coach Loxley did that I thought was really good, especially in hindsight, is he gave everybody in this program a clean slate. Everybody. And when he met with every player here, when he got the job, you know, he was very clear with that where, you know, here's your canvas. You're going to start your canvas right now. So whatever you've done before this point of us showing up doesn't matter to me. You get to write your story from right now. So that was good because he essentially gave everybody in the program a second chance. Whether they needed it or not, he gave it to them. So, you know, we had some attrition that came that next year, but I don't know that we ever had like a mass exodus of the program.
I know it's kind of like old school thinking, and you know, whenever I say the word old school, I just hear Zach Evanesh in the back of my head. So, but it's kind of the idea that, you know, familiarity breeds discontent, or, you know, the idea that, hey, if you're too familiar with your players, it becomes impossible to discipline them. I kind of am almost seeing something where it's almost the exact kind of other side of the spectrum, and like that was the coaching environment that I not only played in through not only college, but you know, the NFL was a little bit different. But the place that I really saw something similar to what you're doing was when I went up to Baylor, and I got, you know, Kaz was one of our strength coaches at the Chiefs, and I got to go up and hang out with Kaz and see the way that he was coaching those guys. And their issue with discipline was, when I asked him about it, he's like, you know, I think the discipline becomes less of a factor because we have such a close relationship that these kids don't want to let you down. And he goes, you know, and he goes, now all of a sudden that, like, because they know we're in their corner and it isn't this kind of us versus them mentality, that if something goes wrong, the players are quick to police it because they know we're all on the same side, and they, you know, we're not the bad guys, we're not the wardens, we're effectively, you know, and he joked and called it inmates. We're all inmates. And are you seeing that kind of mentality, that there's definitely been a switch?
Yeah, and I'll tell you, there's been a big difference in that between years 1 and 2. You know, so for us, with what we do here in terms of discipline, and I got to be very clear with this, we are very, very intentional about discipline versus punishment. You know, there's a learning component to discipline, and I think the punishment, a lot of times it's just mindless things, but we have a protocol where it's really player run, and it's an expectation that's upheld by the players. And what we're working towards is getting it to where it's an expectation that's set by the players. So for right now, like if a guy misses something or he's late to something, first of all, there is always that feeling of like, I don't want to let them down. But more often than not, he knows what he's got to do to make that up. And there's not really a whole lot of backlash with that. And that's a good thing for me, because I'm going to tell you, one of my weak points is, as a coach, as a head strength coach, I always want the player to see it my way. we've got the hindsight. We've got the 2020 vision. We know a lot of times that, hey, you don't need to do this because, or you need to do this because. And for me, I'm headstrong. So I always want guys to see it my way, and I'll snap for no reason. It's been really good being in a situation where the players kind of look at you. They're like, Coach, we got this. We're good. Don't even worry about it. I mean, they joke with me on Saturday mornings like, hey, don't even come out of your office. We don't need you out here. We don't need you with whatever we're doing. So that's been a huge difference for us between years 1 and 2. And again, I think the piece for coaching, it goes back to the relationship with us, but it also goes back to we're intentional between punishment and discipline. I'm not looking to punish guys. I don't want things to be punitive to guys, right? It's just you get the privilege to do this. It's not the right. And because it's a privilege, there's a certain standard, there's a certain expectation, and we got to meet it. And when it's not met, then there's a price that we've got to pay for that.
Oh, it's good. I like the distinction between punishment and discipline, because I think all too often coaches hide punishment as discipline. This is a disciplinary action because this, if that, and then it just looks like, punishment. I mean, I remember I got like when I was in college, the only time I really ever had to do dawn patrol, which basically started at 5 a.m. and you basically run the stairs until the sun comes up at 6 or 6:30 or 6:21, whatever it was. And it was because I took a late hit. Like this dude was piling on, took a late shot on our receiver. So the next play I ran down and I picked that dude off the pile and I ended up getting a penalty. And they ended up, giving me this dawn patrol thing. And I'm like, wait a minute, but our running back got a penalty for something and they didn't give it to him. And I always remember thinking, like, I don't mind getting punished. I don't mind discipline as long as it's unilateral and everybody gets treated the same. What I didn't like was like different people were held to a different standard. And I think that's something that, I saw in the NFL, I saw it in college, that not everybody was treated the same. And I always thought that was what really breeds like dissension and creates a lot of animosity and actually destroys teams, is when people aren't treated the same.
Couldn't agree more.
And there's something that whenever people ask me like, oh, what do you think about? I'm like, dude, if you treat everybody the same, I have 3 kids too. And there's like one standard. I don't treat, even though you can't, treat all your kids the same because they're all different people. But like, as long as the rules are pretty unilateral, like this is acceptable, this isn't, when you start making allowances, then I think that's when all of a sudden, you start running into, some serious problems.
For sure. Couldn't agree more.